Video comes to us from Nairobi, Kenya. Dr. Wangari Maathai was a hero to millions in her country and beyond, helping transform communities throughout Kenya through her village-based tree planting movement, the Green Belt movement. She was a hero to many even before she became a hero to many, many more when, in 2004, she was honored with the Nobel Peace Prize. When we told Wangari about this conference, she was so excited to hear about it. And she sent us this message of encouragement just before she hopped on a plane to Copenhagen.
Hello. I'm extremely delighted to be able to link up with you during this wonderful Food and Climate Change Summit in New York City. It is extremely important that you gather to discuss this issue at this time as the world leaders gather in Copenhagen to see how we can come up with a treaty, an agreement that can guide the nations and the citizens of our planet so that we can really survive in the face of this unprecedented crisis called climate change. In many parts of the world, the issue of food is going to be paramount. It has to do with the seeds. Which kind of seeds will be able to give us food and be able to thrive in a different climate? Where shall we get our food from? Shall we continue to get our food from distant places because we want to eat exotic foods, or we want to eat a certain kind of food throughout the year? It is also very important, especially in developing countries, for people to worry about their soils, protect the soils. We are going to be very concerned about the rainfall patterns. When the rains fall, how much that falls. We are going to be concerned about the protected forests. And as a matter of fact, as some of you know, my major focus in Copenhagen is going to be to see if we can make forests part of our solution. As you know, 20% of the greenhouse gases come from deforestation and forest degradation. And that's a fifth of the problem. So we are hoping that forests, trees, vegetation, land management are going to be a very important issue as we move forward. For the women especially, it's going to be a major issue, and especially in countries where water is already scarce, forests are few, the rivers are drying up, glaciers are disappearing from the mountains, and people continue to depend on energy that actually depletes the forest. I'm talking about charcoal, using firewood. These are some of the needs that are very important in the daily lives of millions of people all over the world. And so I am happy that you are gathered to look at these issues from the many different aspects. In the final analysis, it is the way we individually live our lives. I was recently in Japan, and people have heard me talk about a concept known as motainai. And that concept embraces the words like respect, or how much we need to respect the source of our food, the seeds that give us food, the soil, the water, the forests, how much we need. The second word in that motainai concept is respect, gratitude, and do not waste. This reminds me so much of reuse, reduce, recycle. And this is a concept that we have been using many times, and I know many in the audience are practitioners in reusing, reducing, recycling. Now add to that respect, gratitude, do not waste. Because in the final analysis, it's what you and I do in our everyday life. It's what we do when we are using water. That although our taps never go dry, we can remember that there are many people in the world who will not have water. It is the way we use food to remember that there are many people in the world who do not have food. And in this issue, we need to remember that we need to talk to our leaders about climate justice. Remember, there are people like those of us in Africa who have contributed negligible amount of greenhouse gases, about 3%. And we use very little of the world resources. Yet, every scientist is telling us that Africa is going to be very adversely impacted by climate change. So in Copenhagen, we are hoping that the world leaders will join in large numbers to agree on a treaty that is going to take care of us, that is going to encourage us, and then especially that is going to recognize that in the issue of food and security, we need to work together. So I wish you an extremely wonderful and fruitful conference, and I hope that Copenhagen and the leaders in Copenhagen will listen to you. Congratulations and best of the conference.
So most of us this morning probably had breakfast. I don't know about you, my breakfast was kind of eaten a little bit on the run this morning. But whether we had scrambled eggs or whether we had some oatmeal or Fruit Loops, although probably most of us were not eating Fruit Loops in this audience, but whatever it was we ate, we probably weren't thinking too much about climate. This morning might have been a little bit different, but in general, when we're digging into our breakfast or lunch or dinner, we're not usually making these connections between food and climate. When we have heard about the connection between food and climate or have been thinking about it, it's most often it's been really about how is climate going to affect the food supply, the impact of the more intense droughts and floods, the impact of the spreading of pathogens and pests. We've probably been thinking a lot less about how the food system impacts climate, and even less about the power the food system holds to help us heal the climate. But it's high time we start interweaving these storylines. For the very food system that we know is so broken, is spreading diet-related diseases from the Bronx to Bangkok, that's creating hunger amidst plenty. Most powerfully, we just heard that a staggering 1 in 6 people in our country alone is going hungry, more than 1 billion globally. It's this very same food system that is such a significant contributor to the climate crisis and to the deforestation that you heard Wangari talk about. So to help us continue interweaving these storylines, we have our next message from another incredible environmental heroine, Vandana Shiva. Vandana Shiva has a tremendous influence across the globe on policy about food and farming, on social movement building. A physicist by training, an activist by conviction, an author and farmer organizer by trade, Vandana, in a way only she can, helps us get the climate food connection in this video she sent to us. So as you listen to Vandana, help us make these connections and help tease apart the dynamics in our food system that have led to so much destruction. Also, hear Vandana's call for us to embrace a kind of cautious hope in the face of so many of our daunting challenges.
Dear friends who have gathered at the food conference in New York, I'm very sorry I can't be with you personally. But my heart is with you, as are my thoughts. I do believe food is the most important challenge of our times, both in terms of the threat it poses, the threat to the planet, the threat to our health, the threat to our rural communities. But it is also critical in terms of the opportunities it provides in making a shift to a just system, a sustainable system, a system in which nobody is denied the right to have good quality, nutritious food at affordable prices. The Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations recently had a food summit to address the fact that 1 billion people are going without food. Tragically, nobody from the G8 countries was there except Berlusconi, the Italian head of state, because he is in Italy. This trivialization of the food rights of the poor, is part of the crisis, and this is a human crisis, but it is linked intimately to the structural issues of how we are producing food and how we are distributing food today. We are producing only about half the food and nutrition that we could be producing. There's an illusion that monocultures, industrial agriculture produce more food. I've spent 25 years of my life working on agroecosystems, planting the kind of gardens that allow us to grow more food using more biodiversity, less fossil fuels, less chemical inputs. We are wasting the sunshine, the soil fertility, the abundance of biodiversity by focusing on chemically based monocultures. We are also misusing the energy because industrial systems generate only 1 unit of energy as food, using 10 units of energy as input. Only half the food produced in this inefficient way then goes to feed people. The rest goes to torture factory farm animals, and it goes to run cars. In rich countries like the United States, half of the food is being thrown away as waste. Add it all together, only 12% of the food potential of the planet is going to feed people. The rest is generating pollution, waste, inefficiencies. We could be doing much better if we used ecological criteria and threw away the outmoded fossil fuel criteria of productivity that have dominated agriculture over the last century in the West and over the last 40 years in our part of the world under the name the Green Revolution, which was neither green nor very revolutionary. Not only is this food system pushing people to hunger, it is at the heart of the climate crisis. Food was a neglected aspect of the climate discussions when the United Nations Framework Convention was negotiated at the Earth Summit in Rio in 1992. It continued to be a neglected aspect of the Kyoto Protocol. Now that some of us have raised the issue of the links between food and climate change, the same people who gave us the problem are jumping on the bandwagon. Monsanto would like to have Roundup-resistant crops as a clean development mechanism in emissions trading. 40% of the greenhouse gases are coming from the way we produce food using fossil fuels, synthetic fertilizers, transporting food very long distance, putting animals in factory farms, which creates methane emissions. Going ecological could get rid of the nitrogen emissions from synthetic fertilizers. Liberating animals and reducing meat consumption could reduce methane dramatically. And localizing our food systems is a vital aspect of reducing food miles. A long time ago, a Danish study showed that for 1 kilogram of food, 10 kilograms of carbon dioxide were being emitted. We need to localize our food system. Those are the 3 shifts we need to make. From global, inefficient, wasteful, unjust systems that create hunger and are destroying the planet, to systems that begin with local distribution and local production, only importing long distance what you cannot grow locally. We'd be happy to send you good spices from India in the future, just as in the past, India supplied the world with good spices. But you don't have to force us to eat bad wheat from Kargil, and the global trade rules that are about mutually assured destruction, using $400 billion of subsidies of your tax money to destroy our farmers, is not the kind of food system we want. We definitely do not want seeds in the hand of one company, Monsanto. The abundance of seed diversity can feed the world. Monsanto can only kill our farmers. 200,000 Indian farmers have committed suicide since 1997 in India. That's when the seed supply started to be monopolized by corporations like Monsanto. And the highest rate of suicides are in the regions where Monsanto sells the largest volumes of its genetically engineered Bt cotton. We need an agriculture where farmers live, the soil lives, the biodiversity thrives, and each and every person has healthy food. Today's food system is a curse on the planet, a curse to our bodies, and a curse to the countryside. A local, biodiverse, ecological agriculture can rejuvenate our health, it can rejuvenate the countryside, and it can rejuvenate the planet. Let's work together. We can make it happen.
How about that Vandana Shiva? So it gives me great pleasure to introduce our panelists this morning. We are honored to have with us today 3 distinguished guests to really help us deepen and continue the conversation. I will start by quickly introducing all of them, and then I have some questions for each of them and some questions that maybe any of you could jump in and respond to. I will start with my far left and introduce Karen Washington. Karen Washington, many of you probably already know Karen Washington. Maybe you've worked with her in La Familia Verde Coalition in the Bronx. Maybe you've dug in the dirt with her in the Garden of Happiness, or taken a workshop from her on urban agriculture or food justice as part of Just Food City Farms training program. Or maybe you recognize her from the streets of New York City, where she is part of the Share Your Blank campaign by the city's Civic Corps. And I don't know if you've seen these billboards across the city where you have this person and it says, what's your blank? So anybody know what Karen's blank is? Gardening, that's right. More than 30 years ago, Karen, frustrated by the empty lot across from her home, decided to do something about it. Today, that lot is now the Garden of Happiness, a thriving community garden with more than 30 members, with vegetable plots, fruit trees, greenhouse, rainwater harvesting system, and a chicken coop. And in the late 90s, when community gardens all over the city were threatened with bulldozers, Karen became a leading activist in the struggle to save our gardens, forming La Familia Verde Coalition. Together, they created a weekly farmers market, still going strong 6 years later. Karen also serves on the board of Just Food, the New York Botanic Garden, many other organizations. And by the way, if this sounds like a full plate, this is, she also has a day job. She's also a respected physical therapist. So Karen Washington with us, honored and here. Thank you. We also have with us Mark Mueller. For the past decade, Mark has worked at the Institute for Agriculture and Trade Policy. Based in Minneapolis, IATP, the Institute for Agriculture and Trade Policy, is rooted in family farms and has been active for more than 2 decades in developing alternatives to the direction of U.S. agriculture and trade policy. This week, IATP has sent a delegation of half a dozen to bring the voice of farmers and sustainability to Copenhagen. And Mark, I guess, was left behind to join us here. We appreciate your being here. At IATP, Mark has worked on everything from on-farm nutrient management to agriculture's role in climate change to policies for increasing access to healthy foods in low-income urban neighborhoods. Here from Minneapolis, Mark has a Big Apple connection as well. He went to graduate school at Manhattan College and taught high school at LaSalle Academy just a few blocks away. And Mark currently directs the Food and Society Fellows Program, which has fellows all over the country working on policy advocacy for healthy and sustainable food systems. Finally, we have with us, thank you, Mark. We have with us Marion Nessel, the Paulette Goddard Professor in the Department of Nutrition, Food Studies, and Public Health, a department she chaired from 1988 to 2003. She's also a professor of sociology here at NYU. Her degrees include a PhD in molecular biology and MPH in public health nutrition, both from the University of California at Berkeley. Marion has had a ringside seat to some of our nation's most important food policy conversations, including serving as a senior nutrition policy advisor in the Department of Health and Human Services from '86 to '88, and the managing editor of the 1988 Surgeon General's Report on Nutrition and Health. And she literally wrote the book on food politics. It is called Food Politics. The subtitle is How the Food Industry Influences Nutrition and Health, and it was published in 2002, and I continue to return to it as an incredible resource. In that book, she explored the powerful forces shaping food policy and shaping dietary advice. Her other books include Safe Food, What to Eat, and her most recent, Pet Food Politics, with the best subtitle ever, The Chihuahua in the Coal Mine. Along with her classes and her writing, her new book is called Feed Your Pet Right, and her public speaking, Marion somehow finds energy to blog as well, and really wonderfully so, at her website, foodpolitics.com. We are also joined this morning by New York City Tap Water. It's very good. Thank you, New York City. And CSAs from our neighborhood CSA in Brooklyn, but Just Food CSA. So we've got our apples from the CSA. I'm going to begin the conversation with you, Mark. As we sit here today, a lot of people 3,500 miles or so away from here are talking about climate change. From forestry experts to heads of states, from representatives of small island states to Greenpeace activists. And so, Mark, I would love for you to share some of the main principles of food justice that folks from your organization are bringing to the international conversation on climate, and how that can help us think about our conversations here today.
Sure, thank you. Thank you very much for this opportunity. And my carbon emissions are much smaller going from Minneapolis to here rather than Copenhagen.
I hope you rub it in. I hope you rub it in real well when they get back from Copenhagen.
I have to plant much less trees. I'd say three things in terms of the social justice component that we want to look at. One is we need an agreement. We need to address this, as was so eloquently said, is that people are going to suffer, and it's going to be the poor that are going to suffer the most when we have floods and droughts and the rest. So we need to go forward. A couple of the concerns that we have is one is about looking at carbon more and more as a commodity. You know, something to be traded, like grain, like oil. This is a way that we go forward and we can make some progress. But some of the concerns that we have is that food is multifunctional. Agriculture provides so many different benefits. You know, it provides community benefits, it provides income benefits, it provides health benefits. It does all these beneficial things. If we look at one aspect of food and agriculture, that it can sequester carbon, that's fine, but we can't lose what is the most important thing about food, providing food security. And here, we're blessed, as Anna was saying, we're blessed. We all had breakfast, I assume. We all have enough food. But in parts of the world where there is not enough food, we have to have what we sometimes called subsidiarity. What trumps the other thing? And right now, it's looking more and more like carbon markets are going to trump everything. And where we feel food security has to be number one, first and foremost. We have to have everyone have enough to eat. And then let's deal with the carbon markets second, because right now we have the order mixed up. The last thing I want to mention is I was in a diversity training a couple days ago, and we were talking, there's a bunch of food activists that were talking about different ways of doing better work that we're doing. And it struck me after I had this training is that this type of training would have been excellent for the US negotiators in Copenhagen. And the reason I say that is because one of the things that was said is that we have to remember the history. We can't forget history, that there's been a lot of atrocities that have occurred over the past several hundred years, and we just can't wipe that away and say, let's just start right now. But that's what we want to do. That's what we in Europe and the United States want to do, is say, let's just start at 1990, or now let's just start at 2005, and forget the fact that we have several hundred years of spewing carbon here in the United States. We can't forget that. It is just not fair to have people in Africa